Go on.
Hey,
So go ahead.
I guess we're being recorded, and I think we're being live streamed, and I think we're good to go, right?
In
Hearing
theory.
no.
Let's see if it's
Okay.
going up. I don't know. Hang on. Oh yeah, it is. Okay.
All right. Are we go?
We are go.
All right. Fantastic. Good evening, everybody. Most of you probably do not know me. My name is Audris Johnson, and in Amtgard, I am Amarra, Countess Amarra of the Iron Mountains. And so this evening, I'm pleased to just have a little discussion with you all about some basic things that you want to consider if you're doing A&S tournaments. A lot of people get really intimidated by the idea of doing a tournament, whether it's a small scale local tournament or something larger like a Dragon Master or even an Interkingdom event. No need to be intimidated. Arts and sciences are such an integral part of our entire game. So I'll talk a little bit about that this evening and see if we can maybe bring a little more comfort and a little more familiarity to the entire process. So I'll give you a little bit about me. I've been playing Amtgard since 2015. And then many years ago when I was in college, I played a different LARP for about 5 years. So I have a fair amount of A&S experience between those two. I do love the A&S. I love arts and sciences tremendously. It's one of my favorite parts of the entire game. So I will make a little bit of a plug tonight for why you should do A&S any chance you get. There's so many good reasons, but I'll try to not get too bogged down in that though. So as I said, I'm in the Iron Mountains, which you probably know is in Colorado. I actually live in Denver. And I want to make a very important point here, something that you need to understand. There are as many different opinions on A&S and on A&S tourneys as there are people who do A&S. Maybe even more, because people who don't do a lot of A&S sometimes still have an opinion on it, as many of you have probably found out. So what I'm going to give you tonight is really based on my experience, my observations. That doesn't mean it's the gospel truth, and that doesn't mean that there are not people out there who probably know better on some things than I do. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing about A&S that you need to know is that it is a very subjective thing. Okay, one person loves to see really creative weapons. The next person has no use for any of that, and all they really want to judge is shields. Okay, next person is gonna really hate monster garb, and then the person after that is gonna really love anything that is inspired by Pokemon. Okay, and so you got to keep that in mind when you're doing A&S. A lot of people get frustrated because they'll enter a tournament and they put so much work into this one thing. Well, it turns out that maybe the judges aren't so fond of that particular period of history, or they don't know a lot about it. All right, don't be discouraged by that. It happens. The next tournament you're in could be completely different. I have seen it happen where the exact same item was entered in 2 different pretty high level tournaments, 2 different sets of judges. They responded completely differently to the item. And it's not uncommon. And so that's what you got to keep in mind. Having said that though, if you're into A&S at all, then you know how much it brings to the game. And that's where I want to talk a little bit about what your approach ought to be when you're thinking about getting into an A&S tournament of any level. So why do people do tournaments? Is that a no-brainer? Maybe that's a no-brainer. Probably the most common reason, one of the most common reasons that you'll hear people give is they want to win. Of course they want to win. Everybody would love to win a tournament or place very highly in a tournament. People will also do A&S tournaments because they would like to get awards, whether or not they win. They really want to get another dragon, a higher level Garber. I think most people probably would love or have dreamed about maybe getting a knighthood someday, whether it's in arts and sciences or other fields. But arts and sciences, obviously, we have the Serpent Knighthood for that. And then we have the Master Garber, the Master Owl, the Master Dragon. All of these are high level recognition. A lot of people would love to achieve that someday. And those are great reasons to do A&S tourneys or just A&S in general. But there are other reasons too. And I do feel that this is very important to think about whether you're planning to do a tournament or not. Okay, if you're going to get into A&S at all. But tournaments in particular, when you get feedback from the judges, when you get feedback from any kind of an audience, it really helps you to improve your own work. I have been doing crafting of some kind. Oh my gosh, the first time I ever picked up a needle and thread, I think I was about 7 years old, and I was making clothes for my Barbie dolls. Raise your hand if you maybe got started with something when you were a child. Okay, a lot of us did. Okay, and obviously I'm doing a little more refined stuff now, but I've been doing this a long time on some level. And it's very, very easy when you're doing crafting, sewing, any kind of creative stuff to develop a tunnel vision with your own work. And you have a tendency to see one of two things. You either see all of the flaws, including some flaws that maybe are not there. I'm my own worst critic. Hello, I live in that space. Or all you see is what's great about it. Both of those things are equally not good if you are going to be a crafter. Okay. Crafting brings so many benefits to the individual, obviously. And in order to really continually learn and to continually get better, it helps so much if you can beat that tunnel vision. Pull yourself out of that tunnel vision, pull yourself out of that comfort zone. One way to do that is to get your work in front of other people and have them look at it and give you feedback. Look at it with their own level of expertise. And you can get really great feedback from people who know your craft really well and from people who don't. I remember one time years ago when I was watching some judges at a tournament, one gentleman who was kind of a rookie judge, he looked at some of the garb that had been entered. He didn't know much at all about garb. He had never sewn anything. So he asked the people modeling the garb, is it comfortable? Hey, that's actually a pretty important question, right? I mean, can you actually wear this garb? Can you wear it comfortably? Can you breathe in it? Can you fight in it? Can you move in it? We've all seen some really beautiful garb out there, probably that it's like, wow, how does she even move in that dress? So that's not a bad question to ask. It really is not. So we want to beat that tunnel vision. We want to all improve, even if it's just a little bit, and every bit of feedback you get can help you do that. Something else that I would like to make the point with regards to A&S is that A&S is actually a type of service to our game. I bet that surprises some of you, right? Raise your hand if you're surprised. Okay, so yes, it actually is. Think about Amp Guard. Think about the first time you ever saw a big group of folks on the field. Think about the first time you ever saw a court. The key word here is see. You see the costumes, you see the weapons, you see the shields, you see that you look a little deeper, you see the small accessories, the belts, you see the belt pouches, you see the sword frogs, you see the belt favors, the jewelry, so many, many little details, so many things that make our game awesome, that really create this environment that we all love so much. It all comes down to A&S. That's why I say that A&S is actually an act of service. Anytime you create something and share it with others, others have a chance to experience the game a little bit the way that you do. They have a chance to learn a little something that they didn't know before, whether it's about a particular type of garb, a technique, some really awesome tool that they had no idea existed. I mean, think about the first time you ever saw a sword frog that was designed specifically for an amp guard weapon. They're not that common. And it's something that not a whole lot of people are making. And yet wow, they're pretty amazing. When you see one and it works and it actually works as designed, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. So that's why I say that A&S is an active service, and it's a very sometimes it's something we take for granted, and we really shouldn't, but we tend to do that, whether it's our own work or others, or even folks that don't really participate so much in creating A&S. They still partake of it and maybe don't even think about it that much. But this is why A&S is so important to our game. And it makes the game more enjoyable for everyone, every single person. So with that in mind, now getting back to the topic of why should we do A&S tournaments? What do we need to think about if we're going to enter a tournament? And I would encourage you to ask yourself, what does success look like for you? Now, I didn't say winning, okay? Not everybody's going to win a tournament. Not everybody's going to win every tournament. Probably there's something wrong if you have one person winning every tournament, but that's not the only thing that can happen in a tournament. Think about what success is for you. What does it mean to you? Is it just awards? Is it just pursuing a scroll? Is it just getting that masterhood someday that you would like to get? Or is it about bragging rights? That's actually kind of a big one, you know? Being able to say that, hey, you actually had best in show. Maybe for you, success is building a little bit of your reputation. You know, maybe you would like to be that person that is known for creating the absolutely amazing, true to life looking plastic dip shields. We have somebody in the Iron Mountains who is incredibly talented with that. Maybe you would like to be the person who creates the incredibly realistic looking, very, very true to life, historically accurate 14th century garb. That's pretty amazing to see, isn't it? I mean, we've all had those experiences where something catches our eye from across the room or across the field, and it's just really lovely. Maybe you would like to be that person who's known for your food creations. I am a little bit that way here in the Iron Mountains. And I'm known as the person who does the allergy-friendly food. One of my proudest moments, about 2 years ago now, I entered a Dragon Master, and I knew I probably didn't have much of a chance to win. Some of the other entrants were a little bit more elaborate than mine, and that was fine. But at the end of the day, one of the judges, who was a Serpent Knight, made the comment on my food entry, my cookies that I entered, that she really loved them. And by the way, would I be willing to make them for Endrain? Because she was the feastercraft for Endrain. So for me, that was a hugely exciting thing that I still remember, even aside from placing third, which I was delighted to be third in Dragon Master. But the thing I really come back to is that somebody liked my entry enough to want to feature it as part of the Endrain feast. That's a big deal. That's victory. That's success. And that is yet another way that I was able to make the game a little bit more awesome for everybody for one evening, just a little bit more. And she put on, of course, a really fabulous feast too, and it was capped off by the cookies. And made things a little bit easier for her and brought just a little bit of cheer for everybody. So that is another way that you can find success. It's not always about awards. It's not always about scrolls. It's not always about I was first or I was second or I was best in show. Sometimes it's about those small things that people will still be talking about months later. And that's a really amazing thing to be able to do too. So we're thinking about participating in an A&S tournament. Another important factor that you want to consider, now we're going to get into a little bit of the practical matters of it. You want to think a little bit about the judges. Let's talk about judges for a minute. All right, so those of you that have some experience with A&S, many of you probably have experience as being a judge. Some of you maybe have thought about being a judge or been asked to. Maybe you said yes, maybe you said, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know if I know that much. Well, let's talk about this. The truth is, A&S judges come in all shapes and sizes. There are people who judge tournaments who have been at this for decades. There are people who are very skilled in so many different types of A&S. It's amazing. There are people who seems like everything they touch turns to gold, and they almost can't produce something that's not beautiful and amazing and functional and practical and sturdy. There are also judges who are very, very highly specialized in one or two things, and then they know a little bit about several other topics, but maybe they're not experts. That's probably the majority of judges, by the way. There are very, very few, I would say maybe only a handful in our game of people who judge who really, truly are very well versed in everything or almost everything. It's actually not that common. Some of the best, most well-rounded judges I've ever seen, they still will turn around and ask questions of the person entering the item and say, tell me more about this technique. They'll go and look stuff up on their phone if they don't understand. And then we have another set of judges who are maybe more enthusiastic than anything, and they are in the process of learning. Now and again, you are going to get a judge who is maybe not that skilled, maybe doesn't really know too much about a lot of topics. They're just getting started. What I will say, the judges that are really worth their salt, they're not necessarily always going to know everything, but they are here to learn. They generally do this. They generally judge because they too love A&S. They absolutely love A&S. They feel it's a very important part of our game. And in that sense, they're a lot like, frankly, a lot like the competitors. So you need to keep in mind that judges are human. They're not going to know everything. They are here to learn. Occasionally, they are going to make mistakes. I have actually seen judges completely misunderstand or misread a particular thing. And well, hey, it happens. All right. They're not superhuman. They're not you know, they're not superheroes or anything like that. They sometimes have poor eyesight. Sometimes they have food allergies or other allergies. I actually, a few years ago, watched a Best of the Best tournament being judged. I was there to learn, so I volunteered to shadow. And one of the entrants was actually a handmade lotion. It smelled lovely. It had a nice texture. The judges were very impressed with it. 20 minutes after they had moved on to the next item, one of the judges broke out in hives. Turns out that that judge was allergic to bergamot, and the lotion contained oil of bergamot. So you never know. But you got to realize that they're human just as much as you are. You also got to realize that at one time, every judge, you know, they all started somewhere too. And a lot of them started out with very simple projects and built their own knowledge over a period of years. So with that in mind, you have to realize that you are presenting your work to human beings who are not perfect. They're going to have questions. Sometimes they're going to be very limited in time, and they won't necessarily be able to spend a whole lot of time asking you a lot of questions, or maybe not even a whole lot of time actually reading the write-up. I've heard of tournaments, never seen one myself, but I've heard of tournaments that had upwards of 100 entries in them, and the judges had, say, only a few hours to judge all of those entries. That's a pretty big task. So keep that in mind, especially if you're going to a larger tournament. The smaller ones, it's usually not quite that bad. If you're talking about only a few dozen entries, then there's a good chance that the judge will be able to spend a little more time, maybe talk to you a little bit or ask questions if you're available, depending on how the judging is being conducted and when and where. So that's great when that can happen, but it's not always possible. I also ran a tournament once several years ago where, unfortunately, that afternoon we had an absolutely colossal rainstorm. Two of my judges who were carpooling together were about 3 hours late. They couldn't help it. There wasn't anything they could do. They did the best they could. I was more concerned for their safety, but I was really wondering if I was going to have to come up with a last minute plan for this tournament. and the tournament did not get started until very late because of that, because of the rain delay, and the judges couldn't get there in time. So that really did compress our timeline, and sometimes that happens. So with that in mind, when you're preparing for a tournament, some things that you need to keep in mind: you've got to be flexible yourself. Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about some practical ways that you can get the most out of participating in a tournament, and also some ways that you can really be a good competitor. The kind of competitor that actually will make the whole experience positive for you, for the judges, for the other competitors, for the crowd, the person running the tournament. Because all of these people are definitely, they're part of it. We're all part of it. So you want to think about making life as easy as possible on your judges and on the tourneycrat. And by the way, I'm assuming you all understand the term tourneycrat. That's what we call them in the Iron Mountains. That's the person who's running the tournament. So first and foremost, you got to come prepared, and you got to understand that just about anything can happen. You need to think about what the site is going to be like. And by the way, that's something that, to the extent possible, you want to find that out well in advance. Is it an indoor site? Is it an outdoor site? Have the crats rented a pavilion, a covered pavilion? Will there be electricity? Will there not? Think about what the weather is going to be down there in Florida. I mean, obviously you get a lot of rain down there. Up here in Colorado, we can have
a little bit of rain. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, what was that, Alana?
A little bit of rain. Or
did I? Yeah.
A little bit. I think I'm underwater at this point. Okay, go on.
I imagine so. We've been hearing about the tropical storm heading that way. So yeah, ouch. But think about it. I mean, in Denver, it could be snow. I actually ran a tournament one time where it was just a misty, drizzly, freezing rain off and on all day long. And yes, we were outside. And oh my goodness, it was so cold. I didn't feel my toes all day long. We also up here occasionally we'll just get wind out of nowhere for no reason anybody can tell. Just the wind will pick up and start to blow everything to kingdom come. We'll have that happen, especially in the fall. So you want to think about when your entries are there, ready to be judged, waiting on, usually on a table, they'll be arranged. You don't want your items to be the ones blowing into the next county. So you need to be prepared for that. Be prepared to have a way to pin stuff down if necessary. Anything that's a little bit heavier is probably not going to be an issue, but if you have small items, if you have writing entries and you've got hard copies waiting for the judges to pick up and read, then you want to think about that. How are you going to secure that so that somebody doesn't have to stop what they're doing and go chase all over the park to try to find the pages of your story? It's pretty hard to judge a story if 2 pages go missing and can't be found, right? That's not a lot of fun. One critical item that you want to think about is your write-ups. What's a write-up? Okay, those of you that haven't done a lot of tournaments may not be as familiar with write-ups. One thing I'm going to tell you, this is very important. Any tournament that you enter, no matter what, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, whether you are told to do it or not, prepare a write-up for every entry. Even if you're told you don't need one, just do it. You'll be glad you did. Prepare it in advance. Don't think that you're going to get to the site on the day of the tournament and sit there and write out your write-ups for every single entry. First off, that's going to take you forever. Second, you're going to forget details. And third, well, what if there's traffic and you get there late and you've only got 5 minutes to write everything up? You can actually end up with lower scores just because the write-up is poor. Don't leave points on the table like that. Also, when I said that you want to make life as easy as possible on your judges, well, part of the way you do that is with a good write-up. You don't want the judge to pick something up and say, well, what is this thing? Don't assume they know, okay? With a sword, it's probably pretty obvious this is a sword. But with other items, for instance, garb accessories, sometimes it's not as easy to know. Other items, if you had to make design choices, very particular choices and that are unconventional, you want to include in the write-up why you did that. Okay. I'm working on a project right now, actually, that is going to be a jewelry bag that I'm going to enter in a tournament. It's made up of, I'm not kidding, 9 different fabrics. And none of them are especially AmpGuard-like. They're all prints. Some of them are flowery. Some of them have, there's a butterfly print. The colors are all different, mismatched. Why in the world would I do this? Well, if I were judging it, that's what I would ask. Amarra, why did you do this? Well, I'm doing it because all of the scraps are leftover pieces from last year when I was making masks for the pandemic. The fabric was given to me by a good friend of mine who heard that I had no fabric to work with. I still wanted to donate some masks, couldn't get fabric. The stores were closed and they were sold out to the bare walls of cotton anyway. She shipped me a box of fabric to use for these masks. The pieces I'm using were too small to make more masks, so I saved them, and now I'm making this jewelry bag that will be a gift for her. But the fabric, which is an odd design choice, it's all different colors, okay, very unconventional and, you know, definitely unconventional for AmpGuard. There's a reason I did it. And that's the reason that I'm going to explain in my write-up for the judges. Now, the judges, they might like it, they might hate it, but they will understand. A good judge will put aside their personal preferences and judge the item based on the overall appearance and the quality of the work. I happen to hate the color yellow. I absolutely despise yellow, but you can enter all of the yellow garb you want if I'm judging. I will look at the overall design. I will look at the durability. I will look for the cleanliness of the lines and how much attention to detail you gave it. So what if it's yellow? I would have chosen green, but that's okay. You like yellow? We're on it. So that's something that you don't necessarily have to worry about so much for judges' personal preferences, but you do need to be prepared to explain any unconventional choices that you might make. If you're entering something that is day glow orange, for instance, that's a pretty unconventional choice in AmpGuard. Your write-up should explain why day glow orange. Are you concerned about safety? Is this item going to be used in a quest that is going to take place in a wooded area, for instance, where there are other people? Maybe you are proposing a new monster class for a battle game and this monster glows in the dark. Hey, it sounds like a great idea, but tell me that. Don't make me outguess why you used day glow orange, because I will probably be scratching my head if you don't tell me why. So all those things need to be included in the write-up. In general, I recommend that write-ups be no more than a page. Remember what I said, that sometimes judges run short of time? You don't want to give them a 10-page write-up, or really even a 2-page write-up that they have to sort through to find the important piece. No more than a page, and if you can get away with, say, a half a page, that's really not a bad idea. Not every write-up has to be really long. And long write-ups do not necessarily imply quality either. Sometimes the only thing you need is a really short write-up. Writing entries, by the way, poetry, short stories, very often do not need a really long write-up. Sometimes they do, but generally speaking, I expect that the story or the poem or the essay will tell me what I need to know. So keep that in mind. But like I said before, I will reiterate, everything gets a write-up. If you get to the tournament and you find that the judges truly do not need or want it, that's fine. But 9 times out of 10, I find that they're glad to have it later on. So bring a write-up, always. Let me see here. I have some notes here, some cheat sheets that I wrote up earlier today. So I want to see what I'm covering here. Okay, so think about this is another very good, important topic when you're thinking about a tournament. You want to consider presentation. You've probably heard people talk about presentation. What does it mean? Well, some people think the presentation only matters when it comes to food. Okay, let's talk about food for a minute. Let's talk about presentation. Food is actually one of my favorite items to enter. Most of us aren't really doing a lot of food right now because of the pandemic. In the Iron Mountains, we're not going to be doing it for our upcoming Dragon Master. At some point, that's going to come back though. And it's really a delightful item to enter. With food, arguably, that's where presentation tends to really be important and where it really matters the most. I would maintain it matters for just about every entry, but definitely food, definitely food. And again, we come back to our cardinal rule, make it easy on the judges. Well, in the case of food, you want to make it easy and you want to think about the overall experience for the judges. First things first, always bring more servings than you think you need. You want the judges to be able to taste the item. And if you've done a good job, they will enjoy it enough that they're going to want another taste. And then maybe they're going to want another taste. You don't necessarily have to bring 8 dozen cookies. That's not what you need to do. But I would say that you definitely want to have enough to make a good plate of cookies presentation and allow the judges to have a pretty good amount. Think about how much you would like if you wanted a good, satisfying snack. It's probably not going to be one tiny little nibble of a cookie. It's probably going to be an entire cookie, maybe 2, right? Don't be too upset if they don't finish what they're tasting, especially if there are several food items. They're probably trying to save room for other stuff too. But your goal here is that you want them to enjoy your item enough that they'd love to have more if they just had the time or if they just had the stomach space, okay? But don't always. Another proud moment I had in a tournament several years ago, actually related to food, was I entered it was a orange cinnamon pecan cupcakes, if I recall correctly, little miniature cupcakes. I plated them on a glass plate, presented them to the judges that way. And I had prepared enough so that all of the 5 judges and the tourneycrat could each have 2 or 3 cupcakes if they wanted them. And then I added a few more too, just for good measure to make sure that there were plenty. When I went to collect my plate at the end of the day, I noticed as they were judging, by the way, that they each had a cupcake. Some of them had 2. Okay, great. Well, then there were more than enough. I took home an empty plate, a completely empty plate. And that meant that the judges finished whatever they were doing with my cupcakes. They went on to the next entry. And then they came back and snuck another cupcake. And then probably they came back and snuck another cupcake. This is good. This is what you want if you can. That's a very, very good sign with food when you take home an empty plate. But the point is, you also don't want them to say, wow, gosh, I really want some more of that. And wow, we only got 3 pieces. That's a bummer. Why didn't we get more? That's not the question you want them to ask, okay, if you can help it. So food, presentation, if you possibly can, you want to put it on as nice of a plate or platter as you can. Doesn't have to be china, it doesn't have to be silver plated. Most people have got a few good plates laying around that you can pack and take with you. Yes, you run the risk of something breaking. I actually have dishes that I keep around just for this purpose, that I take just for Amgard purposes. And if they get broken, it's not a big deal. They're not part of my regular set, so it's not a big deal if they break. And also, if you really are concerned, like if you're in an outdoor setting and you're concerned that something is going to break or maybe be a hazard if it's glass, well, okay, take plastic, take wood, but just make sure that it is the best, nicest looking thing that you can come up with for this particular purpose. One good trick, by the way, a really good trick, get yourself some nice cloth napkins, solid color, preferably a dark color. I think dark colors are best for this. When you're getting ready to go to a tournament, wash that napkin, press it really nicely so it's good and flat, take it with you. And then if you're serving on a plastic plate, lay the napkin nicely on top of the plate, put your cookies, your cupcakes, whatever you're serving on top of that napkin, serve it like that. All of a sudden, you've got a really nice looking presentation, and hey, it's on plastic, big deal. No big, really not a problem. If you need to bring serving plates, which I do recommend you do, unless it's a finger food like cookies, that's not really a big deal. You can just pick one up and eat it. But if you're bringing anything at all that needs a plate or needs a fork, like a cake, for instance, or a casserole, if you can swing it, again, bring real dishes and bring real silverware for the judges. Make sure you have at least 5. Usually the maximum number of judges is 5. I always also bring some for the crat, just in case. And if the crat doesn't want it, somebody will eat it. No big deal. It's better to have too much than too little, but bring the best quality dishes for serving that you can. Bring napkins. If you really do need to bring plasticware for serving, like plastic plates or even paper plates, okay, get good quality. Get really good quality. Try to avoid bringing the happy birthday teddy bear plates that you used for your cousin's 6th birthday party last week or whatever. Try not to do that if you can help it. Go ahead and spring for the good quality, very sturdy plates. You can get plastic ones. You can get pretty good quality paper ones, but bring the best ones that you can for the occasion. Bring napkins, always bring napkins, bring extra napkins. And again, make this as easy as possible. If you are in an indoor setting or a place where you have enough room to spread out, I recommend that you consider going to the extra trouble of laying out a small cloth, like a small tablecloth, or even just another large napkin. Lay it out on the display table with your plate of cookies, your napkins, your forks, or whatever you have there. Lay it out ready to go. Typically, when it's time to judge food, typically the entrant is asked to present the item to the judges and serve it. Doesn't always work that way, but that's very typical, especially if it's a hot dish like a casserole. One thing that you really do want to keep in mind too is cleanliness. Whatever you do, don't make the mistake of bringing something that has, and you bring like a serving utensil, maybe that has got some water spots on it or something. You want everything to at least appear to be as absolutely spotless clean as possible. You don't want anybody to scratch their head and say, wow, has this been washed? You really don't want judges to ask questions like that. I have seen it happen. It's not fun. I've also seen it happen where somebody brought a homemade, I believe it was a liqueur or something like that for the judges to try. And the person unfortunately didn't even bring cups for it. Did not bring cups, brought a jug of this stuff, plopped it on the table and left. The judges did try the item, but they sure weren't happy about it. So yeah, that's not good. So for other items, not necessarily food, presentation, again, you want to think about presentation. You want to think about the entire experience of the judges. So small items of jewelry. Again, I love the idea of bringing a napkin or a cloth nicely pressed, solid color, lay it down on the table, and then lay your jewelry item on that. You can take a safety pin and pin your write-up to the napkin or the cloth to make sure it doesn't blow away. Again, you're thinking about the weather if you're outside. That's a very good way to do it. I have also brought like small boxes, a small like a flat gift box, and laid the napkin or the cloth inside the box and then arranged the jewelry in the box so that it's self-contained, especially a necklace and earrings or something that's like several pieces that go together. It's a good way to display them and keep everything together. The judges then don't have to scratch their head and say, well, here's a crystal bracelet over here. Does that go with the necklace? Am I supposed to judge them? No, well, they know because it's all there together in one self-contained little box or tray. Serving trays are another good thing to use for something like this. writing entries, find out in advance if you need to provide soft copies or hard copies. I suggest you try to have a hard copy for every single judge if you possibly can. It'll make things a lot easier. I put my writing entries all in a folder, a paper folder like you get at Staples or office store. On the outside is where I staple my write-up with my name, assuming that you're to put your name on your entries. Put your name as well as that this is a writing entry and then the title of the story so that people will know that, hey, okay, this is entry number 3 or whatever. And they're all there together. And again, a lot less likely to blow away if they're contained, self-contained in a paper folder. For garb, whatever you do, clean. You want it to be clean. Again, speaking from my past experience, I have seen judges pick up an item of garb and they immediately put it down and walk away and say, I refuse to judge that thing because it is filthy. Don't let that happen to you, okay? Especially if it smells bad. That you don't want to do that. Now, sometimes with monster garb, it's meant to be dirty. That's fine, okay? You don't want it to be dirty in such a way that grease is rubbing off on somebody's hands. No, that's not a good idea. Not a good look. It needs to at least smell clean, and it needs to not be leaving stuff on people's hands when they pick it up and touch it. You got to expect them to pick it up and touch it. Be prepared to put it on a hanger. Be prepared to pin it on the hanger so it'll stay. You can't always hang garb up. Sometimes there's no place to hang it, but bring hangers just in case that's a possibility. Be prepared to pin the write-up to the garb item as well. With garb, you want to make sure that it's, if possible, you want it to be pressed unless it's supposed to appear wrinkled. And I recommend you bring a sewing kit with you. You never know what's going to happen. Bring a sewing kit, have a needle already threaded with the right color of thread, bring a good pair of scissors with you, and be prepared to fix things on the fly if needed. It happened. I've had pieces of garb that went south on me, like right before or right after a particular tournament. It's not a fun thing, but it happens, okay? Now we're getting a little bit short of time here, so I want to switch to another topic that is a little bit newer on the scene. In the past year, we have all heard of, and many of us have participated in online tournaments, entirely online, nothing being done in person. I believe there's one going on right now in Neverwinter. In fact, I'm helping a little bit with the judging on that. It's
every time I go beep every time I text in that chat for you guys. I'm like, hey, I can make your live class go beep for the judges. Okay.
Yeah. If you're hearing my phone go off, that's what you're hearing. So with the online tournaments, though, it's a little bit different than an in-person tournaments, and I think they're here to stay. I think we're probably going to still see some online tournaments even after the pandemic is long gone. I think that we're still going to see some online participation. One thing I'm noticing with online tournaments, and this is incredibly important, whatever you do, you need to provide a lot of photos, provide more photos than you think the judges could possibly be interested in for your item. I suggest that you consider an overall photo, 1 or 2 up close detailed photos, show a picture that is not just the photo, but a picture that that's set back a little bit. I recommend you consider holding the item in your hand and taking a picture of it with your hand, because that will show the scale. If it's something that is to be hung up, show a picture of the back so that the judges can see how it is going to hang up. You want the judges to be able to envision the item in their hands. Pick it up. What does it feel like in their hands? How heavy is it? Sometimes that's hard to portray. Is it going to hang up? Is it going to sit on a table? Is it something that they're going to take down and use occasionally? Is it a functional item? These are the things you want to think about. If you are entering something in an online tournament and you're only providing 1 photo, chances are good you're doing something wrong. Okay, chances are good you're missing something. You're missing an opportunity to show detail of the item, the workmanship of the item. If you're doing garb online, especially, I recommend that you take photos of the inside of the garment to show how the seams are finished. Okay, if they're just pressed flat, fine. If they're done with pinking shears, fine. If they're done with fray check, fine. All of that's going to be in your write-up, right? Okay, because you're going to do a good write-up too. But you want to show them, and you want, if possible, you want the judges to be able to see at least one area of the stitching, because they're going to want to see if it's crooked, if you're stitching good and steady or not. So these are some things that you want to think about. If I'm judging an item in person, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to look at it from every angle possible. Now, you obviously can't submit 200 pictures of something for an online tournament. Please don't do that. That's too many, okay? Anywhere between about probably 4 and 10 is probably going to be about right. I also suggest, if possible, you want to show at least one in-progress photo. Right now, the jewelry bag that I'm making, I've been taking pictures as I go along, sewing several pieces together, and then taking a picture of the outside and the inside of that. Once it's finished, the inside is not going to be visible, of course. I want to show the judges what my process was, and they want to see it. Good judges do want to see it. Remember, I said that the judges are here to learn. Judges are always looking for an opportunity to see what people's progress looks like. Sometimes it's not possible to show, but when it is possible, such as an online tourney, take advantage of that. And definitely you want to try to give the full experience to the judges if at all possible. So that is about all I have. Alana, I don't know if anybody might have sent any questions to you, or if you have any points you'd like to bring up and ask me to elaborate on.
There wasn't really much that was going. I mean, people were chatting. I can talk. People were chatting, and they're like, "Yes, I agree with you 100%. This is all very good advice." I would like to say, I would like to continue to emphasize that you need to wash your garb before you enter it, because that is nasty, and I don't want to. Oh no, no. I want to take points off because you need to clean it. So that was all I have. I agree.
And that's one point that I will emphasize too, that this is kind of the sad part about tournaments when this happens. But like I said, I've seen judges refuse to judge an item because it was filthy, because it stank, quite honestly. I have heard of cases where a judge started reading a story, got about half a page into it, and said, "Oh, this is extremely graphic, and I don't feel comfortable reading this." You want to think about the judge's experience. Food is another one. I have got allergies myself. There's some things that I cannot eat. If I have doubts about what is in something, then I won't even touch it. So full ingredient list. But yeah, again, think about the judge's comfort. So that's an important point.
I agree with you, especially with the written stories. Sometimes you need a content warning. Be like, hey, just heads up. This is very, we want to know before we get into it, like, because nobody wants to, like, judge stuff and experience trauma at the same time. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
that's right.
Well, did you have anything else, or are you ready to, because this is great. I really appreciate your
yeah, it's a delight. I love to talk about A&S because I love A&S, and I really do encourage people to please consider participating in some way in A&S, whether it's for an exhibit or going to a class, or just anything you can do to further your own A&S experience and thereby make AmpGuard a better place for everybody.
One point. Sorry, I'm checking the thing. Yeah, so yeah, I don't see anything other in the live chat. Wind almost swept away my gate tent one event. It was crazy. Yeah, I mean, we're in like Florida and Georgia, and crazy weather is, I feel like there's always a hurricane warning for one of our calls. Like, okay, we're good. So, but we might have to leave. So, all right. Well,
Certainly.
then this is, are we good to go? I'm going to stop recording and stop live streaming. And once I figure out how to do that, there we
I
go.
believe so.
Okay. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you
live streaming.
so much.
Thank you again. And I'm going to stop.